Hello and welcome. Are the Russians now also facing a collapse of the Kherson front? We will talk about the latest rumors, how likely there's some truth to it, and what the results of that collapse would be. Today's latest news is that the spokesperson of the operational command south of the Ukrainian forces is saying they are negotiating with whole Russian units on the Kherson front line about capitulation. This is completely unconfirmed as of now. I can't emphasize this enough, especially regarding the latest news we had from the past days that I also mentioned in my previous videos. Beginning with Ukrainians crossing the border and stealing lots of military vehicles and returning to Ukraine, completely unconfirmed. Adding to that, the supposedly reaching of Lysychansk by the Ukrainian forces that had broken through on the Luhansk front, completely unconfirmed, never happened, never materialized. And for instance, here we have Chuck Farah, who is for 2 days was publishing maps like this, according to which Savatove would be already reached by Ukrainian forces and they would advance further. Those maps are spreading around, but I have not seen a single proof that the Ukrainians have actually crossed the Oskil River as of now. And those maps that are more or less accurate and more or less up to date, like this one here and like this one, both don't show any sign of the Ukrainians having crossed over. So we might face just another rumor, but we will further investigate how likely it is that it's true or how unlikely. And you might ask now in the question, shouldn't the Ukrainians keep such negotiations secret to prevent the Russians from implementing countermeasures? There are already reports about Russian troops behind their own lines ready to shoot deserters and fleeing troops. Now, again, those are only rumors, even though they are the third time in this war that they happened. The first time right at the beginning of the war in March in front of Kiev, where supposedly the Kadyrov fighters, the Kadyrovtsi, the Chechens there were deployed there just for that purpose, to shoot, to execute, to kill deserters and fleeing troops. A second time was a supposed deployment in the last day during the Kherson offensive. Now that would be the third time. I didn't see any proof of that happening at all during the whole war, even though it would be good Russian tradition happening in the past again and again and again. So at least there might be some credibility to it. But there's also an argument why publishing this news would actually make sense if it's true. And that is, in psychological warfare, such an explanation would be extremely helpful. If you think the units to your right or to your left are about to capitulate, how likely is it that you are going to continue fighting? If they capitulate, the Ukrainians have a gateway into your front line. They will threaten you. And if you try to raise your hands then to capitulate, it might be too late, as their artillery will pound you first before they even come close, and they might shoot you before you have a chance to capitulate. So if the others are actually also raising their hands in the white flag, maybe you should do that as well. So in this regard, if it's true, this is both an argument for and against it. It might be psychological warfare that they say it is happening in the hope that Russian units have exactly that thought and follow suit. Or it might make absolute sense in this regard, so more units decide to capitulate. Nobody, as I said in the past, wants to be the last guy to die in a war. And since the beginning of that war, we are talking about horrible morale of the Russian troops. The defeat in the Kharkiv Oblast, which seems to be complete and devastating, must have its effect on the already bad morale, on the already badly disciplined and badly equipped Russian soldiers, and it must create some sense of helplessness that they are about to die for something that has no prospect of succeeding anymore. And add to that the attacks, the continuing attacks on the ground line of communications in the Kherson front, where the HIMARS are pounding the communication lines for weeks already. All the bridges are taken out of commission. Barges, the pontoon ferries and pontoon bridges are hit again and again and destroyed all over again and again. So when troops that were already badly equipped to begin with are now facing additional shortages that should reduce their willingness to fight even further. And then on top of that, we have reports from that many Russian soldiers are questioning the whole purpose of this war, as especially the book basically that the Russian paratrooper from the VDV, Pavel Fliatev, has published, where he said they were expecting to be welcomed as liberators, and instead of that, the Ukrainian army fought them tooth and nail, and the civilians were in defiance waving their Ukrainian flags to show them that they are not welcome. And in 2 days ago, 1 or 2 days ago, in a Russian state television talk show, they talked about that they thought at the beginning of the war their biggest problem will be once they reach Odessa, that their soldiers might be hugged too hard. Now the thing might be more that their soldiers might be choked by those people they were supposed to liberate. So if they question their whole purpose, that might be another reason why some might capitulate. Now, if it comes to that, if it's more than a rumor, and I cannot emphasize enough that it is an official publication by the Ukrainians, but there is no proof whatsoever at this very moment. Should this happen, then it'll likely be the collapse of the complete Russian front on the other side of the Dnieper. Why? Openings in the front line. As soon as we are talking about more than individual soldiers, the Ukrainians have set up a telephone hotline where Russian soldiers were invited by text message to call if they want to capitulate. They published the first phone calls that reached them. They might be fake, they might be true, but there, at least what I saw, it was individuals calling. But should whole units capitulate, let's say company or even battalion level, that would create gaps in the Russian front line. As the Ukrainians are negotiating that, they know in advance where that gap in the front line will be and can thus prepare their own advance, push into that gap, widen it to the sides, push in the rear areas, cut ground lines of communications, destroy supply units and command centers, and basically collapse the front line as they are given a breakthrough and can prepare where exactly it's going to happen. In this case, if that happens, the Russians will have no choice but to go back to a position that is more easy to defend and take back as many troops as possible before they themselves are being overrun and before they themselves capitulate. And the only position of that kind is on the other side of the Dnieper. Now, it's highly unlikely that the Ukrainians will be able to follow suit on the other side of the Dnieper unless they were somehow able to buy Russian units, that they basically commit treason and hand over bridging equipment or anything like this, as all bridges are destroyed or rendered unusable, as the pontoon bridges and pontoon ferries can easily be destroyed by the Russians, and as the Russians have prepared all the bridges weeks, if no months, ago for detonation. So they will not just damage the top of the bridge, they will probably blow up the pillars and collapse the whole bridges themselves. In that case, it is basically impossible for the Ukrainians to follow the Russians on the other side, as they would have to cross a wide river against a full opposition and against the fire of the opposition. But that would could still be a massive decision, maybe even the decision of the war, as this would mean the Russians basically lost any chance of reaching Mykolaiv or even Odessa during this war, unless they manage a complete and utter defeat of the Ukrainian forces at another part of the front. Also, the Ukrainians after that would be able to thin their line along the Dnieper, create new reserves for further offensives. Now, in the last hours, I read more and more reports from the pro-Russian Telegram, which indicate a coming Ukrainian offensive in this area here, probably at least in the direction of Mariupol. In a case like this, they could add tens of thousands, 10,000, maybe even more troops to an offensive like this, and exploit the Russian weakness, create a new Schwerpunkt, and push through the Russian lines there to create even more devastation. But that's not even all. In a case like this, that heavy defeats happen at several fronts, the rest of the front is also shaking. Soldiers don't want to die, and will consider that the war is lost now, definitely now lost, are even more likely to capitulate, and the soldiers from the so-called People's Republic, the DNR and the LNR, might be afraid of consequences within Ukraine, as they are traitors and turncoats. They might end up in prison, whereas Russian prisoners of war only face prison time if they have committed war crimes and those are proven. They have a chance of returning home either through prisoner exchange during the war or as soon as the war ends. The fighters from the DNR and the LNR might be afraid that they might end up in prison for 5, 10, or even 20 years. So it is fairly likely that they will not take the risk of being taken prisoner. In a losing war, the only chance for that is to run as fast and as far as you can, which means they would run east into Russia. Should it come to that, that could actually be the decision of this war, as the whole Russian front line should collapse in this. But as I said, this as of now is just based on one Ukrainian report, which has extreme implications in case it is true, but it's quite possible that it's completely untrue. That's it for now. I want to thank you all for being here, and this channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you want to support, you see the options in the description of the video. Other than that, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Don't forget the bell button. Share that channel with your friends and acquaintances, and hit the like button, and write a comment how likely you think this might actually happen, what the Russian options are to come back in this war, and what do you think how this will play out in the near future. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.